right, hello, how are y'all doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good to see you.
Doing well, thank you. Would y'all like to go ahead and introduce yourselves, or would you like me to?
Go for it.
Cool. My name's Ian McKnight. I'm one of the two band directors at Roseville Area High School in Roseville, Minnesota. This is my 13th or 14th year teaching and my third at Roz. I taught middle school in Appleton, Wisconsin for 4 years, and then I taught for 6 years in Watertown, Minnesota before coming here and joining Matt at Roz.
But what's special about your third year here at Roz?
My third year here at Roz is actually maybe going to be a full year, which we'll see. I feel like you're not allowed to say that.
Yeah.
Because that might jinx it, but
yeah. First time he came back from spring break and actually had normal school.
That's right.
My name is Matt Dehnel, and I'm the other band director here at Roz. I've taught here, Roseville Area High School we call Roz. I'm not sure if we mentioned that. I've taught here since 2001, so I believe that makes this my 22nd year here at the high school, 21st. And it's really, I had 2 small town jobs before this, but basically this has been my career here at this high school.
That's good. And just to kind of give a little bit of introduction on my end, these 2 gentlemen here had a consortium. They hosted a consortium for, I think it was the Minnesota Consortium for Black American Composers.
That's right.
Yep. Do you want to talk just like an overview of the project and kind of like what inspired you to, to start this consortium?
Yeah, the main event that triggered it was the killing of George Floyd here, which is what is it? A couple of miles from our school.
10 miles
from our school. That happened, and obviously triggered a lot of the things that it did. The striking moment for me was that happened. I don't remember the exact date. The next day, I had my band classes, and I kind of I didn't mention it. I barely knew what the headlines were. Like I was disconnected from it the next day. So I taught my classes like I would normally teach my classes and moved on with life. And it took, I think that evening, maybe it finally sunk into me that like, oh my God, this thing just happened and I didn't so much as mention it, which was a sudden, I don't know, a sudden mirror reflecting back on me that of me exercising my white privilege and me having students in my band that were massively affected by this, which really all of my students were affected in some way, but obviously some it hit home more than others. And the fact that I just wandered through my day without mentioning it really struck me, and I felt like okay, things need to stop. I need to do something differently with how I interact. And so luckily we have this strong relationship here where we can bounce ideas off of each other. Sorry, we've got to quit the door. Where we can bounce ideas off of each other and work through things together in a trusting way where we can both confess to each other that maybe we've made a mistake and maybe we haven't been as active in being anti-racist in our program as we could have been. So we started talking about how can we do that? How can we be actively anti-racist instead of trying to be not racist, as Ibram X. Kendi would call it. And so several ideas bounced around, but one of which is how can we elevate Black voices in our world, in the world of band music? And so we had the idea of commissioning new music, and I'm not sure exactly why originally we came up with the idea of having 10 composers, but that was like that's what made sense to us is let's try to track down 10 composers and bring their ideas out into the world of band music. It ended up being 12 for various reasons, but that's where it came from. I think one of the questions we asked is how can we musically state Black Lives Matter? We wanted to be okay saying that in our schools, in our programs, in our classes, not only saying those words that Black Lives Matter, but also how can we state that through music and through our curriculum. So that's the kind of the conversation, the sequence of events that brought us to trying to conjure up that project.
Okay. I think the best question, what were some of your thoughts before going into this project? Because I mean, let's be transparent. This is a racial, I mean, we know that the George Floyd incident is a racially motivated incident. And, you know, the response, you know, taking to something like this, especially with that mindset, it can be easily misconstrued in a way. So what was your train of thought as far as decide as either, you know, let's do this to make sure we don't come off this way, or was it just a, regardless of what people think, we need to do something?
I think it was a little bit of both. We had the idea. I mean, quite honestly, Matt came to me with this idea because one of the things that Roz has done for a long time is commission new music. It was something that I had never done before. This was my first commissioning project. And Matt said, "What do you think about doing this?" I said, "I think that's a great idea." So we started to kind of spin the wheels a little bit, and there was some pushback from people that, you know, we like other band programs, other music teachers, about, you know, are we trying to be, you know, saviors in a space where that's not our job to save people. One of the things that Matt said to me early on, which helped me kind of put things in perspective a little bit, was, you know, we're two white male cis band directors that, like, you know, we have a ton of privilege in society, but those two people talking about racial justice is better than those two people not talking about racial justice. And so we just felt it was important. It was an important thing for us to do. But, you know, some of the constructive criticism and pointers that we got from other people were well taken. Like, there were some things that we didn't think through carefully, and some things we had to change along the way. But I think as soon as we thought this might be a good thing, there wasn't a whole lot of looking back. There was some second guessing, and like I said, some things that we had to change along the way. But you know, once we decided to do it, it kind of went from there.
And I think one of the other early conversations was that idea of realizing this position of white privilege and the sort of the implications of us wandering into the conversation about racism is being willing to be wrong and being okay with, like, yeah, we're probably going to misstep because we're outside of our experience, but we have to be willing to do that. So we're gonna try to put this out there and try to do what we think is the right thing. And if somebody corrects us and somebody tells us that we did something wrong, then we learn from that, and we talk about it with people like you and anyone listening and watching, and we all learn together. So, and yeah, like Ian said, having those conversations is better than not having those conversations.
And I will say, we were set up, I think, to do this by the administration in our district as well. There's a big push here at Roseville, and I can say this being a relatively new teacher here. There's a push for us by the administration to always look for, they call them absent narratives, things that are true in your whatever discipline you teach. What stories aren't being told and why? And that was a push. I mean, I remember even when I was interviewing for this job, it came up like, what do you think about, like, diversity in programming, and what should we do about that? And I don't remember what I said, but since I started here, we've been thinking about making sure that our programs aren't all white guys, and certainly the Black American voice is conspicuously absent in the band world. So that was another reason we've been thinking about doing this. And then with the George Floyd incident just kind of provided a match to a kind of smoldering fire. to kind of move us in the right direction of taking action. Which, you know, should it take something like that to move you to action? No, but it did.
Right. And I know you've talked a little bit about managing the situation as far as like other band directors and other outside influences. What were some of the obstacles that you faced internally as far as working with the composers? And I would even say maybe some of the other band, well, no, I would consider that outside influences. Uh, Talk about some of the struggles that you faced working with the composers and some of the lessons that you learned that maybe if somebody else wants to do something similar to what you did, that they could learn from your mistakes or from your successes.
I think one of our biggest, I don't know if I'd even call it a misstep, but some people would. One of our biggest adjustments that we made after publicly saying we're doing this thing was that we initially sent out the request to composers and asked them to write. I think the line was about the Black American experience, and our thought there is that you are a Black American, and so are the other composers, and so how can you speak to your own experience, and how can others grow from that, and to some of the composers and to some of the other people who were sort of advising us on the project, that came off as as us saying, like, can you speak for all Black people and tell us how it is to be a Black American, which obvious. I don't know if it's obvious that it wasn't our intent, but it definitely wasn't our intent. But it was pointed out to us that it could have that feel to it, and so we took a step back and said, we want you to write what's in your soul. We as a composer, we want we want your voice. We want you to speak about this, and we were open to the composers about that, as you well know. That we said this was our original thing, and some of you maybe were rubbed the wrong way by it, and some of you weren't. But we said we're taking that out of it. You don't need to try to speak to the Black American experience. We want you to be an artist and to speak to us. And yeah, and then so some of the composers then said, fine, this is my music. Some of the composers still chose to actually use that phrase, the Black American experience, in their program notes, in their thoughts towards the music. And so I think that was one big thing of making an adjustment in at least our language, if not what we asked people to do. And honestly, we had some of the composers say, hey, I appreciate that. I appreciate that you've given me the freedom for my voice. But we also had a couple of the composers say, when I take a commission, I'm okay with somebody saying, like, we want this piece to be in memory of that person, or we want this piece to be about, christening a new space because we're opening a new concert hall, or we want this piece to be about, your experience as a human being. So some of them were like, yeah, that's okay. You're commissioning me, so you tell me what to write. But that was probably our biggest sort of, like I said, I don't know if I call it a
course
misstep,
correction, maybe.
Yeah.
I remember there was one particular composer in the consortium. We did a couple of Zoom meetings, you might remember, over that summer about, hey, we wanted you all to meet each other and be able to talk to each other and, network a little bit, but also so we could all talk about what this consortium was going to be. I remember there was one composer who asked a question about, he was struggling with kind of style or affect. I can't remember the word he used. And maybe he just like missed an email where we corrected the whole, like, you don't have to write about the Black experience. And I remember we stated that on the Zoom, and I just saw his whole face go, oh, okay, I can just write what I want to write. Like, I don't have to feel like I have to take on the weight of an experience that I'm not ready to write about or don't want to write about. So I was thankful that we were corrected in that way, because I think for him anyway, at least to my eyes, it seemed like that took a little bit of a load off and it just allowed him to be an artist, which is, I think, a good thing.
Yeah. Great. what did you, I know each of the different bands did something different as far as like inviting the composers and doing different things. How did you involve your students in this experience, and how did this impact from what you can see? I mean, obviously you can't speak on their behalf, but what were some of the noticeable differences that you saw, conducting this consortium and getting your students involved, whether it's seeing all the final products or, engaging the students on the topic of, racial inequality and bringing this into it?
My experience with one of the pieces that my bands did is a piece called Voyage by one of our composers named Kristen Holmes. It's a gorgeous piece of music. If you're a band director out there, you should look it up or look her up. I don't think she's published it yet, but she wrote about, it's just about a journey. It's not a journey about anything specific to her. It's open to interpretation by conductor, by the band musicians themselves. And this was all during distance learning. And I asked the kids, it's like we were gonna present this in a virtual concert. So it was gonna be us, all the kids recording their parts on their own, and then we'd stitch it all together. But like, you have to have some kind of visual component when you come out with a virtual performance. Otherwise, it's just an audio recording, and that's not very engaging. So I said, like, let's talk about a story that we want to tell, like a journey that we can make. And we had a lot of different ideas. I had kids storyboard ideas for what voyage they wanted to talk about, and there were a lot of different ideas. Some kids wanted to write about an actual like ship journey, of rough seas and calm waters and arriving at your destination, that kind of thing. We had Justice Ginsburg had just died, and so we had kids that wanted to tell her story, because there's lots of conflict, there's triumph, there's success, and then we had a lot of kids that wanted to talk about the movement created by the groundswell created by George Floyd's murder, especially in Minneapolis. It's our hometown, and it seemed like that was the right direction to go, because it just felt like this consortium was created because of this event, and we need to talk about it. We need to be able to have a voice. And I remember a lot of our students saying that's not our place to talk about that. That's not our job. And again, the thing that Matt said is, regardless of what your race is, talking about racial justice is better than not talking about it. And the conversations are really difficult. I had students that were crying after class when we talk about things that we wanted to show and pictures. And do you show this picture, or is it too violent, or is it going to trigger people? We brought in, we have a group here at Roz called the Black Student Union, which is an extracurricular group for Black students to gather and be together and talk about things that matter to them and things that affect them where it's just them. And I reached out to the advisor of that group, and I said, hey, would you come talk to us, and tell us, because in our band program, we've got a lot of white kids. There are a few students of colors, but they're certainly in the minority. So we wanted to make sure that what we were saying spoke to their experience. We got a lot of great tips of things like, yes, do this, and this isn't okay. Yes, please show this picture. People need to see this picture. But at the same time, I remember one of their biggest thing was, we don't want to see at the end of this thing, because the piece of music ends kind of triumphant, or at least it ends with a major chord. It seems like there's a resolution. They're like, we don't want to see, black hand signs at the end of this thing, because it's not over. It's not resolved. It's not all okay just because you played a piece and want to feel good about it. Not by a long shot. And we took that to heart, and I think our final project reflected that. So those were certainly some of the difficult conversations that we had in my bands with students and with me. And I struggled a lot with, am I doing the right thing here? Are we talking about this in the right way? Do I even have anything to say about this in a meaningful way? But we worked through it together, and I think we are better for it.
Yeah. Did you have any tips that you received from your Black activist group at your school that could apply across the board, or was it more towards this project specifically?
I mean, I think what I was saying before, the idea um, that the battle for justice, racial justice in this country, is far from over. We've made strides certainly, but even since you know George Floyd's murder and the trials and convictions after that, there have been plenty of mirror image incidents in our Twin Cities area and in other places around the country. So while it's nice that we can say that maybe there's been some accountability for George Floyd's murder, it's not. We're certainly not healed. It's not over, and that was something that really spoke to me. Because I'd like to think, well, maybe not. If I hadn't had that conversation with those students, my musical brain goes, oh, well, this ends with a nice, pretty major chord. Let's have a happy ending, because that just makes sense. But that's not true to the experience of the people that we talk to. So we changed it.
Yep. So just curious, you mentioned that the piece ended with that major chord, and like you said, the natural inclination, major chord, happy ending after, this long, perilous journey. How did you and your students end up interpreting it after that conversation?
I remember that we ended up trying to. We did a lot of research about organizations in the Twin Cities metro area that are actively working to help, help with racial justice issues. I don't want to say solve it, because solve is not a thing that's going to happen by one organization with one thing. But we ended up we put up on the screen at the end a list of organizations that people can donate to, like to help make your voice felt, to actually feel like you've got a dog in the fight. Like put your money where your mouth is and donate to those causes. We felt like that was the positive outcome of the journey, rather than something being solved. And yeah, so that's kind of where we went with it.
Yep.
All right. And then the last question I had for y'all is, what did you two take out of this personally? Out of the process from the murder of George Floyd through the wrapping up of the logistical part of the consortium, and every experience that you had between the composers, between your conversations with the Black activists, and just having the time to reflect on it personally. What all would you say you took out of this for yourselves?
The two things that spring to mind, I've already kind of touched on. One is, I never denied that white privilege was a thing, but I never really examined it and what it meant and how much it benefited me, and tried to empathize with what it's like to be on the outside of that privilege. And so it really has had me examining my life, not only my career and my curriculum and my teaching, but my entire life, and trying to grasp that so that I can begin to help dismantle it. And my other thing is just being comfortable with discomfort, and being able to talk about this, being able to approach a Black composer and talk about race, and know that I feel uncomfortable talking about that with anyone, but particularly with Black peers and Black students, and just saying, yep, I'm still uncomfortable with that, but I have to do it. This is what has to be done. This is what's going to make the world better. Is not just me making the world better, but more people doing that. And so if I'm uncomfortable with it, then I wouldn't want to swear. Tough, just tough. You got to be uncomfortable and do with it. So those are the two big ways, I think, in which I changed.
I think for me, obviously, I agree with everything that Matt said. We're not the same person, but we think very similarly. For me, I realize, as a music professional, there's so much out there that I didn't know. There's so many more composers, whether Black composers, Asian composers, just composers of color, non-white male composers. There's so many out there that if you're, if you're like I was a few years ago and, going to JW Pepper and looking at the top selling and, buying the latest tune by, prolific white guy composer, yeah, it's good stuff, but there's so many other more richer experiences that you can give your kids, and never discount the impact that maybe you've got just one Black kid in your program, or maybe you've got one Native American student or one Asian student. Never underestimate the impact of them seeing somebody that looks like them in a space where they don't often see. That can be really, really powerful. And it's easier now than it ever has been to find these composers. It's not one Google search. You got to take a little bit of time. But man, the rewards are definitely worth the time that you put in.
All right. Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I just want to ask you a couple questions just to get to know y'all personally. And I will put a link to the Roz band page. Is that where they can kind of see of like what everybody's doing and just how the program's coming along?
Yep.
Cool. So I'll put a link there. And now I have a couple of parting questions. So for both of you, what is an interesting hobby that nobody would expect you to have?
Well, I'm a big Fish fan, the jam band Fish, and I've been to 20 or 22 shows or something like that. Maybe that's not super shocking that it's a music related thing, but that's what I like to do whenever I can in the summer. Get out and follow them for a few shows.
I am a weird geography nerd. I'm one of those people I can name all 130 or 193 or 194 countries in the world on a map, and I can do it pretty quickly. It's a weird talent. I don't know why I have it, but I have it, and it's just a thing that I do. So
that's actually I would have never expected geography.
Me neither, quite honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a really interesting contrast, even from the other answers that I've received.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's something that makes sense to me.
Yeah. All right, next one's gonna be a difficult one. A piece or a song that everybody should listen to.
Well, I think everybody should listen to Kendrick Lamar, especially his album Damn, for sure. And the other thing that pops into it's a hot topic in the band world right now, but Come Sunday by Omar Thomas.
Yes.
Is one of the most brilliant pieces of art that's ever been created in our country. So those are the two things that sprung to mind just now.
You stole mine. It's interesting. I think about Come Sunday and just relating it. I don't know if you've got time, but relating it to our project. I mean, that's something that speaks to his experience as a Black man, that piece of music. But I remember when we were Zooming with some of our composers, they felt a little bit trapped by the idea that everything they write as a Black person has to sound like it's from the Black church, which Omar's piece absolutely does. It's the whole point, because it speaks to his experience. But Black composers are more than just that. It's like I said, it's still a brilliant piece, and one that I cried listening to and listened to probably 15 times in a row when I first heard it. But that always is in my brain when I hear that, is that that's not, there's not, Black composers are not just that. Right. It's much more than that. They're just people with different experiences.
And sorry, I know this is supposed to be lightning round, but Les, do you think? I mean, yeah. So let's talk about racial injustice and Black composers and stuff like that. And then you ask us this question, and I give you two Black artists. I don't know, just so that doesn't feel like a manufactured answer. I mean, part of it is my realization in over the course of my 20 years in teaching. About hip hop music in particular. When I was a young teacher, I would, kids would bring that music in, and I would say, oh, that's nice. I'm glad that you like it, but it's, it's not as good as what we do, or it's not real music. Like I said those things, and I feel like an idiot admitting that out loud, but that was how my education went, and how I was. And so now, trying to get into that world and realizing the brilliance of these artists. Kendrick Lamar is the one that strikes me, but there's so much rich art and music happening in hip hop and in rap. So that's, obviously it's influenced by the conversation that we're having, but it's absolutely one of the things. Like, if I have a student teacher coming in a couple of weeks, and that's one of the things that we'll be talking about, is this diversity of repertoire that has been an emphasis in the last few years for us, but also getting outside of what you normally listen to, or having a richness in the pop music that you also listen to, and figuring out what the students listen to, and being authentic about that as well.
Yeah, and actually, you both kind of hit the point that I was going to say about come Sunday. It was interesting that both of you were going to say that, because kind of exactly what you said. Everybody expects the Black composers to be all about the Black experience and Black pride, and expect us to write strictly in that vein. And here comes Omar Thomas, who gives them exactly what they're expecting in the way they never expected it.
Yeah.
And it's really a marvel to me, because I know for me personally, as an African American composer, as a Native American composer, where both of my races are severely underrepresented and underrated, or rather undercredited. It's, to me, it's never been about making my voice as an African American, or as a Native American. Has always been, I want to share my experience with you. If it has to do with race, so be it. But I want you to go through the journey of my life through my music, and hear Omar Thomas kind of, just brilliantly and amazingly gives them exactly what they're expecting. And it gets so personal and under your skin. It's not something you can just listen to and be emotionally detached.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. Next question is a book that everybody should read. It doesn't have to be necessarily about music. It could be about life, anything.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
And who is that by?
Douglas Adams.
Douglas Adams. Okay.
Catch-22. And that's what's his name? Joseph Heller. Yeah. But, and I referenced Ibram X. Kendi. Read How to Be an Anti-Racist. If you haven't read it yet, do it.
Okay. And who is that by again?
Ibram X.
Kendi. All right. Cool. A quote that everybody should hear. A quote from somebody else that you heard that everybody else should hear.
Oof.
Like I said, doesn't have to be anything specific, just anything that has influenced you personally that you think everybody else would benefit from.
This one gets thrown around a lot, and it's not a specific person or a specific quote that anybody says, and you see it lots on people's social media pages or whatever. The one that just says, "You're enough. You are enough." Because it's so easy to try to match yourself up against what other people are doing and not doing, and struggling with and not struggling with. Just to know that, like, obviously we all got things that we can work on and ways that we can grow, but like, just know that you're enough. That strikes me. Also, it's always I always go to the Leonard Bernstein quote about this will be our reply to violence, to make music more passionately than ever before. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but like, whenever music is always a place for me to go to when I'm feeling, when I'm struggling, which is why probably I do what I do. So that always resonates with me.
I like I'm not going to get it exact, but the Maya Angelou quote that is, people won't remember what you said or what you did. They will remember how you made them feel.
Yeah, that's actually in my classroom hanging up on the wall. And every time I just run into those issues and I just point to that poster, and it's amazing how often we don't consider that aspect of it. You know, everybody's just like, oh, I just said it because I'm angry. I was like, okay, but how does that make them feel? And it's powerful. And then the last thing I have is a quote or any advice that you would have for anybody out there. Just some advice from you to the world.
Try things.
Mm.
Like we talked about this project and thinking, I don't know, this could go wrong, but we tried it and we adjusted some things and we made it go. And all sorts of other things, these difficult conversations we're having in class, like, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm probably going to say something stupid, or the conversation is going to go, I don't know where. Like, so go into the day, I don't know. But I've the last few years been more willing to try things, and it has made me a much better educator and a better human being and more closely connected with my students. So whether it's as a teacher, as an educator, or just as a human being, try things. Put yourself out there.
This is probably more directed towards like students. We talk about with like my high school students all the time. Define yourself by the things that you love and not the things that you don't love. You can tell people a lot about yourself by telling everybody the things that you hate and the things that you think are stupid. But if you define yourself by things that you love and you pursue those things, you're going to be a happier person.
I really like that. That might end up going on my wall. I would definitely credit, but that's definitely going to make it on my wall, especially with how pessimistic and derogatory this generation is. It's nice to have a reminder that, you know, positive things matter too, and they matter more. Well, thank you two so much. I am so grateful that you two took the time to come speak with me, and I hope you two enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Christian.
Thanks, Christian. We'll see you soon.